Episode 14 of Red versus Blue. Welcome. My name is Mike Stark.
I'm Keith Curry.
What's going on, Keith?
We're on the verge of the South Carolina primary. Donald Trump and Nikki Haley on our home turf. Polls have Trump up by 35 plus points. Tim Scott has completely debased and humiliated himself in supporting Trump in South Carolina, trying to be the vice president. It doesn't look good for Nikki. But on the other hand, expectations are so bad with a 35-point gap in the polls that if she loses by 25 points, it'll be a pure moral victory. So she's running hard, and she's announced she's going to stay in the race past South Carolina. And, she is like the last army between the invading hordes and Washington. So I wish her well.
Yeah. Now, we need to point out that most people that are going to listen to this podcast will hear it after the primary, but it's almost a foregone conclusion as to where everything's going, right?
Oh, everybody says they don't believe in polls, but I sort of do believe in polls. Now, what's not known is how many independents and perhaps even Democrats will cross over, because Democrats have already had their primary in South Carolina.
Right.
You could see the numbers move on the margins. I would not, frankly, be surprised to see Nikki Haley finish much closer than the 35-point gap that you see in the polls now. But a scenario where she overtakes Trump is hard to imagine.
Great. Okay. Well, that gives people a little perspective. What else have we got in way of primaries coming up? Because it seems like there's primaries every few days.
Well, there are. It's a very front-loaded calendar now. It used to be spread out. California's primary was in June, but now it's on Super Tuesday in March. So the entire schedule has been advanced, front-loaded. It's laying on top of each other. But before we get to Super Tuesday, we have Michigan. And there we have a very interesting dynamic for the Democrats.
Tell us about that.
Well, as everybody knows, Michigan is going to be one of the 4 or 5 states that decide the election. And there you've got the dynamic of a very large Arab American community, predominantly Democrat, historically strongly for Joe Biden. And you've got a member of Congress, Rashida Tlaib, who is leading an effort to have Democrats on the Tuesday primary vote uncommitted. And the thought there is to have the uncommitted vote exceed 15,000 votes because Biden only won Michigan by 10,000 votes. They hope that if they do that, they're able to have leverage to have him force Israel to capitulate to a ceasefire and stop the attack on Hamas. People who sort of poo-poo this in the Democratic primary do so at their peril, because it can be a very treacherous place for Joe Biden. He has been unsuccessful so far in bringing these people over, and they are beginning to protest at other candidates, even here in California, at their events. So Biden has got to tread carefully. He's really been backpedaling on his support for Israel, trying to respond to this, but he's not really able to get there fast enough to the liking of Tlaib and some of the other Palestinian American leaders in the Michigan Democratic primary. So the thing to watch on Tuesday next week is what is the percentage of uncommitted vote in the Democratic primary, because that could spell future trouble for President Biden.
In the general election, especially.
In the general election, absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, the other 2 stories we want to cover quickly somewhat involve Russia. And let's talk about, first of all, Putin, his interview with Tucker Carlson, his relationship with the Republicans and his relationship with the Democrats, and none of it's good, right?
None of it's good. None of it's good for the free world. I mean, we really do live in a world on fire. And I'll just say Tucker Carlson picked the wrong week to go to Russia, because after doing his fawning interview and letting Vladimir Putin sort of filibuster the entire thing and tell him his side of the story and not really ask significantly tough or probing questions, what happened in the following week? Russia killed Navalny in prison. The evidence is pretty strong for that, who was the primary Russian opposition leader. On the streets of Spain, they gangland style executed the Russian helicopter pilot who defected in Ukraine, who had sought asylum in Spain. They're advancing on the front in Ukraine because we've not been providing them sufficient ammunition to carry on the war. And it was revealed that they were placing a space weapon on a satellite that has the capacity to shoot down, using nuclear capacity, America's communication satellites. And if you or anybody that experienced the recent AT&T blackout this week, you know that when comms go down, this country just can't function. So Russia had a big FU to the world this week, and those who have been saying Russia's never done anything bad to me, Russia can be our friend, I can get along well with Putin, which has been sort of the Trump mantra, that has been pretty much discredited. So the whole pro-Putin fanboy group, Vivek and the others, Tucker and the Republican Party, are stand today substantially discredited. And for President Biden, he's dealing with a world on fire that's not getting any better. And his ability to cope with it keeps being in the focus of world attention. And that's just not helpful to him because the Russians continue to advance and continue really not to care about what we say. Today, the president announced new sanctions on Russia. Now, one has to ask, okay, why are there still things left to sanction? Since they've been invading Ukraine, since they've been engaged in, sending weapons to Hamas, since they're supporting North Korea, why is there anything left to sanction? But apparently there is. So we put another batch of sanctions on today. The previous ones have not been very effective, and that's to the discredit of President Biden. So people say, President Obama made a very ill-timed comment in his debate with Romney. He says 1980s call, they want their foreign policy back because Romney was being tough on Russia. Well, we're not the 1980s anymore. We're talking about the 1960s in terms of the potential conflicts that we have around the world and the need to be prepared and armed for them.
That's a great summation and analysis. Thanks, Keith, for that. Now, the Russians play a little bit into the Biden impeachment hearings. Some revelations this week about that.
Well, we now know why the Republicans didn't want these hearings to be broadcast live, because apparently the star witness turns out to be somebody who has been lying to the FBI and was indicted for perjury and may in fact have been providing and advancing Russian disinformation as part of the perjury that he committed with the FBI. So once again, the gang that couldn't shoot straight, who's conducting the investigation, has failed to not only make a case, but has failed to maintain any credibility. Now, they continue to insist that there's evidence there, there's smoking guns. Mostly what's smoking is whatever they're smoking, I don't know, to think that they've still got a case. So President Biden caught a break this week in terms of that sort of blowing up. His brother apparently did not rat him out. If there had, I'm sure that would have leaked by now already. So it looks like the impeachment of the president is going nowhere. Hunter still has criminal charges to face in court, sure, and that's going to be tough for him. But any thought that Biden would be hurt by an impeachment, Biden would not have been impeached anyway because there's not the votes in Congress. It would have had the same effect as the Clinton impeachment, which is to make the Democrats stronger. So by this thing sort of blowing up on its own, it's probably saving some Republican seats, although I'm sure the Freedom Caucus doesn't see it that way.
What I found interesting is after all of this came to light, I tune in Hannity, and Hannity is doubling down along with his guests, Comer and Jordan. They're all on there doubling down, saying, well, that wasn't important to the impeachment. We've still got all the evidence on him and da. So we'll see where that goes. But a lot of showboating going on.
Well, there is. I mean, I'm surprised they weren't standing in front of the Four Seasons gardening store somewhere in Philadelphia to make that announcement. That seems to be where this kind of stuff really gets the biggest play.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else we need to discuss?
Well, we'll have some more election results next week, and we'll see where that's going. We'll have some more court decisions on immunity and on Trump, whether he's on or off the ballot, should be coming out of the Supreme Court. Trump's criminal trial in New York will start on March 23rd, so that's coming up with jury selection. And sometime in March, he's going to have to come up with $500 million in escrow to continue his appeal on his civil case.
Now, would bankruptcy save him through all this?
Well, bankruptcy would not save him. Bankruptcy might reduce the amount of money that is available. But if you believe Trump's financial statements, he's got plenty of money.
Yeah, right. But also his ego, I don't think, would allow him to file bankruptcy, right?
Well, it didn't stop him in the casinos in Atlantic City. He did that 4 times. It'll hurt a little bit, and you'll have a spin for it. But if he thought it would work, he'd do it in what we would call a New York minute. Yeah,
exactly. Well, I want to keep an eye on that because that's kind of fun to watch his money drip away. And he can't even sell hot dogs in New York for the next 3 years, right?
Right. And, he's got Chinese-made tennis shoes now that he's trying to sell, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, exactly. All right. That's been another edition of Red versus Blue. Thanks for joining us. Please subscribe to the podcast and like our Facebook page. We'll be back next week with another edition of Red versus Blue. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mike.